yes, county ownership. And right now, maintenance costs, Matt's compiling those things and providing those to the county for reimbursement to Scott County. So it's more of an FYI. It's still being worked through. And at some point, there's probably gonna be an amendment to the agreement that's currently in place to make that work.
Okay.
Next item I have for you is on the 2023 street and utility improvement project. So what I have brought to you today is a memo to approve plans and order advertisement for bids. And so that I'll note this is about 3 weeks earlier than we originally planned to do it, but this is trying to get things out a little bit quicker. So this would be to order the project. You'll need to pass a resolution if you decide to do that. We have had an open house on the project, actually 2 open houses. One is a public meeting, and then we had the open house last week. I think about 8 or 10 households maybe showed up to that meeting, but open house style, put plans out, let everyone kind of take a look at it, and I think it went pretty well. So if you decide to proceed with the project, I would ask you to approve the plans or the advertisement for bids, and this would have the advertisement starting on February 2nd for a February 24th bid opening. And this would get it just in time to award bids at March 6th bid opening, or I'm sorry, March 6th council meeting. And is trying to, kind of fast track the project a little bit.
And I guess of note, those plans were provided in the email that went out with the packet since they were quite large.
Yeah, I found a little mistake on page 6.
Yeah. So I'm not going to tell you those are the final plans. The February 2nd bid opening is allowing us to take care of our QA, QC. We have another design review meeting on Thursday to kind of go through the last little bits, but you'll see that it's probably about we're not going to change anything too significantly. I think we're going to talk about sidewalk too here, so that's the only thing that may change is some sidewalk things, but otherwise the plans as you see them aren't going to change anything drastically. And I did provide the contract to the city engineer today for his review to make sure that's taken care of again before any bidding documents actually get released.
City attorney, you mean?
City attorney, sorry. Okay. City attorney.
Because you're the city engineer.
I'm the city engineer, aren't I? City attorney, yes.
Okay.
Yes, yeah, the one thing that Chris had mentioned was the talk of sidewalks. There's a couple sets of sidewalks, remind me which streets they were on, Sunset, Sunrise, that are not currently shown in the plans that we're working through.
Correct, yes. So in the feasibility report, sidewalk was shown on 3rd Street Northeast and 1st Street Northeast, along trail connections to the park on the east sides of Sunrise Avenue. During the design process, we've added sidewalk to 2nd Street Northeast, and that is shown in the drawings that are currently in the bidding documents. We're showing on the north side. We have had discussions about should sidewalk go on every street in the future on reconstruction projects, and we're considering adding sidewalk to the east side of Sunrise Avenue for the entire length of the project, and the east side of Sunset Avenue for the entire length within the project area. So that's a consideration. I think the recommendation right now from staff is to add it to the project, and those are not showing those drawings, so we still have to add those into it. So there was an additional cost for all that. That wasn't included in the feasibility stage, but it's just trying to improve the walkability of the neighborhood. And with
you didn't get no kickback from the residents on that? Because what are you gonna do?
They don't know yet.
Will you take it up the side of the roads, or are you gonna, from the size of the road, or are you gonna take it up from their size of their yard?
Well, for Sunrise Avenue and Sunset Avenue, they're being reduced by about 7 or 8 feet already. The street's being reduced downward. There's still 15 feet of right-of-way outside the curb to work with. So there's gonna be a boulevard, there's gonna be a sidewalk. Sidewalk would be 5 feet. The decision on where that would end up hasn't been had yet. We'd have to confirm that. We did include in our neighborhood, our open house meeting this last week, comment card for people to comment what their opinion on the sidewalk would be. We only got 2 cards back, so there wasn't really much opinion. The people that did offer opinion were not in favor of it, but the sidewalk was in front of their houses. And at that point it was conceptual, so we didn't really have an idea what it would look like.
And I guess from my experience, Rick, generally, most people you talk to think sidewalk's a good idea as long as it's not in front of their house.
Yes.
Because they don't want to have to clean it. And to your question about where that sidewalk would be placed, I know some of the consideration I think we would take as to how that would affect trees. While I think technically a lot of those trees are considered city property because they're in the city right of way, I mean, there is still something to be said about giant trees and trying to save as many as you can. The other thing to consider is snow load during the winter. I mean, we have a few areas around town where the sidewalk is considered attached, which means it's right up against the back of the curb. And so when we plow, all that snow goes onto the sidewalk. And so if we can create boulevard to keep that from happening, we'd also prefer that as well as a place for the city snow to go during plow events.
Once that's figured out, can we have another open house? I came here the Wednesday after the meeting, at about 10 to 6, and about 6 o'clock I finally left because the front door was locked. So I don't know if that was that same night. I kinda wanted to catch the meeting, but the front door was locked, so I don't know if other residents
And
tried to do the same thing.
So I came in at 5 o'clock because me and Chris had a meeting before the neighborhood meeting, and I checked both doors and they were unlocked. So I did not go back down at 6 o'clock, but my understanding is they were all unlocked, but
I mean, yeah, I mean, so I
someone
don't-
must have locked it.
I don't know if someone came around then and checked them and locked them, but
That very well could have been, because the thing didn't work, but the truth be told is I went down into the fire, or police department, and it was dark and quiet everywhere, so there was nobody to even ask.
Yeah, so moving forward, I talked to Tim, and anytime we have meetings besides council meetings, we're just gonna make sure we email the police, and Robin's staff, just to make sure they know to leave the doors unlocked.
Yeah, that's probably what happened, was once somebody in the staff left, they turned it and, but yeah, it would be nice if there would be another open house once it was determined where the sidewalks are gonna be. I mean, that's kind of an important issue for the residents, so.
What does it add to the individual homeowners on that side of the street?
As far as
The
cost,
sidewalk, yeah.
well, there wouldn't be any addition to cost to the property owners. The only thing is just that there's gonna be sidewalk there, so.
yeah.
No, but is that spread out between the entire project?
Yeah, so if you remember right,
Okay.
with Columbus, the owners that didn't have sidewalk were wondering if they were assessed differently than those that did have it, and we assess everybody the same, whether
Right.
there's sidewalk being put in or not
Okay,
in front of their
Yeah,
property.
yeah, no change for assessments, the size, sidewalk is not specifically, assessed on
okay.
home improvements in town.
And then, the east side, because of the trees, is that, I'm trying to think
Yeah.
on Sunrise, and I had a neighbor or a friend on Sunrise that had, and I can't recall any trees on that side, but he was on the west side.
Yeah, so that's where we probably have to review our vertical design for the road, so how high everything gets. Generally driveways are slightly steeper on the west side, so we're putting the sidewalk on the east side. Whenever you put a sidewalk through a driveway, you have to flatten it out, and so an 8% driveway becomes 10% because you put a sidewalk in there. And so we're trying to not cause issues with steep driveways by putting it on the east side.
Okay.
So just, yes, there's more tree removals on the east side of Sunrise. But it's less, it'll make the side of the driveways more usable because they won't be quite steep.
Okay,
Most of the driveways on the east side are 5 to 6 to 7%, which is very reasonable.
And as Chris said, we're really looking at this because attempting to make it more walkable without having to force people to walk out in the street just for a safety factor. And really, when you go in to do street projects like this, is really your best opportunity to get in, because we may not revisit this street for another 30 years, would be the hope. So now it's kind of the time to do it if we're gonna do it.
And in future projects, sidewalk will be looked at in other areas to extend towards this project, so there wouldn't be a gap. So there may be some existing streets that are not meant to be reconstructed that'll have sidewalk constructed on them in upcoming projects. So there is, oh, sorry, that will kind of expand outward in future projects on 3rd Street Northeast, 2nd Street Northeast, some other streets that are done, essentially, will have to have sidewalk extended in the future too.
okay. When do you think you'll have the determination on that? Is it already decided for sure, the east side? Or is
I mean, it's not decided for sure. It's definitely something that you all, I think, should have a say in because, I mean, you are the ones that end up answering to.
That's all I'm
residents.
concerned. I just want to get ahead of it, so I'm not blindsided in the grocery
Just don't wanna
aisle
look
at
like
Coburn's.
hypocrites, because we make people, as soon as they improve their property or their, their buildings, it's gotta be handicap accessible, then why shouldn't we have to do the same thing with the roads? So,
Yeah.
I'd say the big push, I will second what Josh says. Every resident I talk to absolutely loves sidewalks as long as they're not on their property. They all say the same thing, and I totally understand the frustration about a sidewalk, but I always explain to them when we do a project like this, we're looking out in the future, 30, 40, 50 years, hopefully the street's gonna be the same. And when we do that, we look at all public safety, not just vehicles, but pedestrians. Like when we realigns Columbus and Second Street, that was a big thing. We wanted to make it safer for pedestrians. Well, that's no different than any other project that we're doing is, how do we make it safe for pedestrians? And as a father with 2 kids, we avoid streets that don't have sidewalks. So I don't, it would be hard to tell somebody, why did you not put a sidewalk here? And not have the, and not be able to say, well, we just didn't think it was needed. Well, I personally do think almost every city street should have a sidewalk. So that's what, again, do residents like them that are on there, that they are on their property? No, but I think they all understand after I explained to them. Even after the our neighborhood meeting last week, I met with a couple of residents at their house to show them where they would be. And they all said, yeah, not super excited, but I understand why you guys are doing it, is what
Okay.
almost every resident I do talk to and explain the scenario to them. They do understand after we explain how we got to the process of where do we put a sidewalk and why we put a sidewalk.
As far as timing on that decision, if you decide to proceed with the resolution to approve plans and bid the documents, it's likely that a decision to add sidewalk would come through addendum, if that's the case for a public meeting to happen beforehand. So we will be uploading drawings, hopefully very close to that February 2nd date, which would be the start of advertisement. From the contractor's point of view, it's square feet of sidewalk. It's not going to affect them dramatically. They'll just bid more sidewalk on the project. There is some engineering that needs to be done to add it into it. So and some permitting probably at on the MnDOT side on the south ends where we weren't planning to otherwise go into Highway 19 at Sunrise Avenue specifically. So so we do have some engineering that would have to be figured out to do that too.
Did you say the roads are gonna be narrowed?
Correct, yeah, 34 feet on Sunrise and Sunset, and they are closer to 40, 41 right now.
How wide's 34?
3rd Street right now is 34 feet.
Okay.
So,
And generally, you're doing that to all roads that you're redoing, isn't that correct? That you're decreasing the size of the roads?
yeah, so if they're a primary road, they'll go down to 36 feet. So when Lexington Avenue gets done, they'll go to 36 feet. Some of these more local roads, 34 feet or 32.
And why is that?
It's just they don't have as much capacity need. So the extra width allows for people to park on the streets. If people park on both sides, it might be a little narrow for one car to come through, but on local streets, it's usually not a big concern. So it's what's being done on new development projects. So a new street comes through, they're coming in around that same width as well. So when reconstruction happens, we're just doing the same thing. So it does save on pavement costs for the city and just building the infrastructure towards the need versus.
So is that
overspending.
discretionary on our part or?
As far as the widths we're going, we're trying to mostly match ordinance for new streets.
Okay.
Yeah, so I mean, yeah, the idea is, as you said, less pavement cost for putting it in and then less maintenance costs because you have less street to maintain. There's less impervious surface, so you're getting better drainage and hopefully it helps with your stormwater because there's not as much water then running down the streets. And yeah, I think many across the country, they've found that some of these really, really wide streets, all they do is encourage people to go faster because it feels like you can go faster. So
Yes, but you can jump out of the way. If you've ever been killed on one of them highways, and then you get one of these engineers that say they're gonna decrease the width of the lanes, I'd say, let's go on out there and I'll show you. It's not very safe. And you can come up with, well, it's gonna slow the traffic down. No, it's not. Good luck.
and I mean,
I don't drive out there no more just because there's no place to jump to. Where are you gonna go when shit hits the fan?
well, and that's where hopefully we're getting people onto sidewalks so that way they're not having to jump out of the way because they're walking in the
Well, I know if you go right down here to these tennis courts, that's way too, narrow. I mean, you put cars on both sides, there's kids running in and out. I've had complaints on that about 3 times. So I disagree with your theory, but go ahead. I guess your generation, whatever.
And I understand that too. I'm not disagreeing with it at all, but I mean, because we have that park right there, we do have a lot of parking around that area. So once you get close to it, it is an issue if you narrow it. So it really creates much more of a demand for a sidewalk than because the road is the pedestrian traffic on that street. No question about it. And
But that Lexington will be a little wider when we do that street next year or the year after. That will be 36 instead of the 34, Lexington North.
Correct, yeah, so Lexington will be wider, anything that's a state aid route, I guess, would be 36.
That's what, 34 now?
Lexington?
Yeah.
That'll stay the same. I believe it is 36 right now.
Oh,
But
okay.
Sunrise, Sunset are what we would consider extremely wide. That's wider than Columbus even.
Well, yeah.
So like Columbus North, it was built at 39, 40 feet.
Yeah, and
That's a state aid road.
Yeah, ended at 38 and a half
Yep.
feet on
But like-
Columbus Avenue.
Eastland, all of Witt's new development, all new streets now are built at that, like Chris said, at that 34 to 36.
So do you keep the center of the road the same, or do you move it?
So on First Street specifically, on this project, First Street Northeast, the road was shifted 2 feet north to allow a little more room for sidewalk on the south side. And that's because First Street, Second Street, some of the sides of the homes are closer to the road than they are. They're the sides parts of the houses, and some of them are only 5 feet off the right of way.
So the curb is going closer to the park 2 feet?
Well, on First Street specifically, the curb's gonna pretty much stay where it is on the north side. And the street's gonna be reduced by about 4 feet in total. And then we're putting in boulevard and sidewalks. So that's just First Street Northeast. Second Street, we would not propose any changes to the street width because everything to the west has been done previously and there's no big project planned on Second Street further to the west. Third Street, we're putting the street back where it is and just adding sidewalk to the north side. Sunrise and Sunset, that's the to be determined where is that sidewalk gonna go. But the road would stay centered in the right of way. We wouldn't be shifting the roadway, the center line or anything.
So these conceptual sidewalks are they in any diagram yet?
No, so we're waiting for an opinion on where to go with that before we work through the engineering involved to start drawing those in. So,
I'm confused, I'm misstated the road. Is Third Street by Northside Park?
yeah, Third Street would be by the park, and that sidewalk is in the drawings.
And
Third
that's
Street,
going on the north side?
correct, yep. Pretty minimal boulevard, 4-foot boulevard.
And
And
the
a 5-foot
curb
walk.
is staying in the same spot, but the,
Curb, yeah, because we aren't proposing any larger improvements to Third Street, that street's largely, it's going back to the same width and the same
so you have some
location.
elevations to deal with there then?
Correct, yeah, yep, and we've been able to work through that, within the project area. So we're able to get the sidewalk to fit where we show it. The sidewalk does stop at Sunrise Avenue, would have to get extended towards the park, in the future. And that gets a little trickier, we have existing curb and we have to figure out exactly how that'll end up in the future too. If there's gonna be a full reconstruction of the next block in the future or how that's gonna work out.
I know we've discussed this in the past, so it's not a new issue, it's just we're coming closer to the project now.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions? Otherwise, I would take a motion to approve the resolution authorizing, approving the plans and ordering advertisement for bids.
So moved.
Okay, it's motion made by Sean, seconded by, I'll second it. Any other discussion or questions?
Just one quick question. In the resolution, it talks about, I'm just not familiar with that, we've read aloud versus, or via Microsoft Teams. How does that work, or what is that about?
That's regard to our bid opening, we're doing electronic bid opening on the project.
How does the public engage with Microsoft Team application to see that?
Yep, so they can, open the same, so what we'll do is we'll have a meeting invite that they could open that invite, same way you'd access a council meeting.
Yeah,
essentially.
similar to our go-to meeting link for this, if
So you'd have to call City Hall to get that.
correct.
How would you know about it?
We are advertising the bid opening in the same way we'd advertise if it was happening in person here. So,
Okay.
If a person doesn't have Microsoft Teams on their computer, are they still able to access the meeting?
So as far as Teams go, I believe you'd have to
You have to have the
access
app.
through a browser, you could access
Yeah.
through a browser. If there was, a recommendation to have it, and you could, I guess, broadcast it in council chambers or somewhere on city property if there was a request to have that in person.
but yeah, it's similar to Zoom or GoTo, where if you don't necessarily have it downloaded, but you have a internet browser.
Okay, so
just click on it. and
you
go through
can
there.
kind of download a free,
Yep.
okay.
Yep.
You should be able to dial it up too, right, on your phone? If you
Yeah,
need
so
to.
there will be a phone dial-up
Yeah.
option.
So you
You won't
could
be able to
listen.
see anything, but.
Right,
yeah,
you could listen to it.
correct, yeah.
Okay, there's no other discussion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries.
Do you wanna talk about a public meeting, or do you wanna set anything up for that? I need to set it up pretty quickly, so I wanna make sure we don't forget about
Like
it.
I guess,
another
do you guys want to
neighborhood
be involved with
meeting?
that, or would you like him just to work with Matt and I to set up a public meeting to discuss sidewalks, and then we'll let you guys know when the time is?
Were you thinking about another neighborhood meeting about those sidewalks?
It depends on how detailed it gets. I mean, if you would at least notify us, if we could see it, we'd know. I got a feeling if they know that's gonna happen, they're gonna wanna come in.
I mean, I can tell you right now, most people are probably gonna be opposed to it because they don't want a sidewalk in front of their house.
Either that or they wanna be informed in on it.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think we can actually, without doing a neighborhood meeting, we have a newsletter that we can send out saying modifications after the weekly, or after our neighborhood meeting that we've decided to add sidewalks to the Sunrise and Sunset. I think if we have another neighborhood meeting, it's gonna be the same 8 residents that came. Usually it's not like, oh, wow, I missed that first one, I should go to the second one now. So I guess that would be my recommendation, is that we just send out a newsletter saying, hey, we modified the plans and adding sidewalk. But we are at the point where, like Chris said, that I will be, if you guys are okay with instructing Chris to continue with adding sidewalks to Sunrise Sunset, because we are at that point where they need to be put on the plans to go for bids.
I guess I thought they would be on there already.
We just decided this last week after we had a staff meeting.
But I know
mainly-
months ago, we had briefly talked about this, because I remember it came up, and because my daughter lives on Third.
Yep, and that we did
So-
add it to, at that time on Third, up to Sunrise, not up to your
Oh,
daughter's
okay,
yet,
so it was
but
just about that part of it?
Yes.
Okay.
And then it was talking about the one on First.
that is correct. It was Sunrise and Sunset that we just really recently,
and yeah, the conversation kind of came down to equity and, hey, this is our one shot here before this gets too far along. Let's see if we can get these on here.
General expectation is the next 2 reconstruction projects will have sidewalk on one side primarily because they have sidewalk, or they'll be connecting in different sidewalk networks. So I do expect those other areas to the west to get that sidewalk. And it would probably leave a little gap in the system if it wasn't here.
Okay. Well,
I'd go with whatever you guys wanted to go with.
yeah,
I mean,
that sounds like a good idea, what you came up with. Just sending out, is that okay?
it's fine with me. I don't live
I think it'd be fine.
Perfect.
Yeah.
And I like the idea of the sidewalks, because I walk a lot and feel a lot safer.
Thought the city, didn't we pass something a decade ago about making New Prague a walkable community?
So we do have a sidewalk plan that we're working
Yeah.
through. And I mean, part of that is expanding out our sidewalk network. I know there are certain areas of town, such as this one, that maybe for whatever reason, 10 years ago, we just decided not, with that plan, to not put sidewalk on this street, or not, whether it's due to trees or a bunch of neighbors might turn out and say, we definitely don't want sidewalk on here, that sort of thing. But I would guess with our comprehensive plan update here in 2023, that sidewalk plan will get looked at again, and whether revisions even need to be made to expand sidewalk off just one side and start trying to put it on 2 sides or what, so.
Are you referring to the one Kay Wilcox told me about?
Yes. Kay was on the council at that time.
And she was a big proponent of sidewalks.
Right. It comes up every time we do a street construction, but, I'd really like to know what the difference is, because in other projects, I was able to say, hey, it's an extra $800 spent, spread out over 15 years. So when will we have that figure from where the assessment is now that we add the sidewalks? What is the difference?
I don't think the assessments will change, based on the sidewalk conversation. I wouldn't think the sidewalk infrastructure being much different than sanitary sewer infrastructure or water infrastructure. It's just a way for people to walk through the streets, and it's not being assessed directly to people, I guess is kind of how I would put it. So there's a cost to the city. You're paying under your general obligation funds, and figuratively, I usually say it's about $10,000 a block to do sidewalk. That's
Okay.
just
But that won't affect the assessment that's already kind of in place.
the direct assessment to the property owners. I wouldn't personally propose any adjustments based on that. So the assessment rates that we have in the project right now are based on the Columbus Avenue project with a 5% increase.
Yeah, yeah, so according to our assessment policy, they're basically set at a per unit rate per residential.
Right.
And then increased with inflation year over year. And so whether we put sidewalk down or not, will not end up affecting that. It'll kind of just be an extra added cost on the city's GO bond that we end up having to pay back.
Okay, and has that always been that same way? Matt, you probably would, 10 years ago?
I know,
It seems,
I know talking to Chris Cavett, it's been that way for a long time
okay,
here.
I could be wrong. It just seemed like we were able to determine the difference of what the assessment was gonna be, whether we added sidewalks or we didn't add sidewalks, and,
Yeah, I would say from project to project, the rates have steadily increased for sure. I know I've worked on streets that are 24 feet, or streets that are 38 feet. The assessment rates weren't different for the residents on the 24-foot street versus the 38-foot street. So there's gonna be a lot of subtle differences between every project, and the assessments haven't been adjusted to fit the project. So it's just been this is the assessment rate for this year. And if it's buying a 60-foot street or a 24-foot street, and
okay.
there's no 60-foot streets luckily, but yeah, it has been the same.
Okay,
All right,
thank you.
thank you.
Did we vote on that? I do believe we need to vote on that.
Oh, thank you, you're right. So Sean made the motion, I seconded it. Any other questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Thank you. All right, the public is invited to be heard on matters not on the agenda. Does anybody want to speak? Anybody want to speak? I don't see or hear anybody. So with that, we'll move on to item 10. Approving the deferral of a special assessment for 2022 street and utility improvement.
Yes, so with all of our special assessments, we allow deferrals for a variety of things. For our 2022 Columbus Avenue project, Roger Canitz did submit a deferral based on age for his property at 406 Columbus Avenue North, and so this is just a resolution accepting his application for deferral and passing that on to the county. What this basically means is once that property changes hands for whatever reason, whether, we'll just say for whatever reason, at that time, the assessment payments will be due. So,
All right, I'll make a motion to approve resolution 2301-1702. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, any discussion?
I had a question on the memorandum. It refers to the policy and it lists the 3 items or requirements, but I'm not seeing an income requirement. Is there an income requirement?
I do not believe our current policy has an income requirement in it. You can get a deferral based on income. I believe that's out of state statute. But this is a different deferral, so you can also get a deferral based on age and disability and that sort of thing.
So there's another avenue to do it based on income somehow?
Correct. And yeah, it's just a different set of circumstances you end up
Is
having.
that done through our city ordinance or some other
Yes,
state?
it is in our policy. I can't think of the exact requirements off the top of my head, but there is an income one that you'd have to then meet a different set of criteria if you were doing it based off of income.
So it's kind of considered a hardship.
Correct.
Because I was wondering why we would have that requirement question on the application if there isn't a,
Yeah, correct.
and I wonder if we should have the attorney look at that, if that's proper or not.
Oh, yeah, we can certainly have them look at it. I'm guessing it was, this is an old application, so I'm guessing it was basically based off of, we kind of have one application and we're going forward with which attempted deferral you'll have, but we can certainly.
Yeah, I would
Look at that
just
application
be
again.
cautious, because
Yeah.
there's so many fair rules about everything.
Yep.
That if we're requiring income information and we don't have the ability to do that, we might run afoul of something.
Because this, I would imagine, will be filed with documents, so,
Yeah, and I don't know that we want that on there.
yeah.
I wouldn't want my information shared on
Correct.
public record.
Maybe it can be redacted before it's filed.
I would have to look at that, just due to the fact that, this all is public information. I mean, you can go out onto a county website and look at someone's particular taxes and whether they're getting assessed for stuff.
Yeah, you're correct.
I will definitely check and see which of this information is public and which of the information, we should have, privatized, I guess I'll say.
So the policy that you referred to, is that under a separate resolution that was passed by the city council at one time?
Yes, we passed was it over the summer?
A hardship?
Yeah, so I remember I was a part of that. I think it was just here over this last summer. It should be in the, city share drive.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if, when I look at page 48, item number 5 of the resolution, if it could be a checkbox on the application that the income has been reviewed, if that's the case. Instead of, sorry, I'm thinking out loud without my microphone on. I'm just wondering if it could be a checkbox maybe on the application that says income has been verified per the requirements of the policy, instead of listing the dollar amount of income. On page 48, number 5 of the resolution, it's making a statement there to verify that income from all sources does not exceed the low income limit as established by Department of Housing and Urban Development. So wondering if we can just edit the application to be more of a checkbox, that it's been verified instead of a dollar amount.
Yeah, something like that.
Or maybe, I mean, in this case, since the application's been filled out, maybe we can just put verified in that box.
Do you actually need action to do that, or can you just do that administratively?
Well, actually, we're adopting the resolution and it doesn't state it in there, but, I mean, you could just file the resolution. I mean, that'll do the same thing. You wouldn't have to file the attachments, because that should be good enough. You know, for a title company doing a search, knowing that I mean, it talks about the assessment deferred, how much it was, and so that's gonna give them a flag to contact the city to, any financing, you know.
So to answer your question, Bruce, if you go into the shared drive, the special assessment policy, on page 8, talks about deferred assessments. The one section basically says, you can defer for one of the following, whether a person is 65, retired by virtue of permanent or total disability, a member of the National Guard or Reserves, called into active service, as well as if a property has been unimproved. It also allows for a deferment as basically a staff side deferment that wouldn't necessarily have to go to you if they meet the following conditions, and there's 5 conditions, where they're the owner of the property, there is a balance, or they're the owner of the property, they occupy the property, they do have an income basically limitation, and then they basically have to apply for it within a certain amount of time, and they must be a certain age to be able to meet that. And so it's basically a different set of requirements for your income base. And I think working with Chris Cabot, we actually pulled those out of the state law regulations as to what the state allowed for deferments and that sort of.
Then you might want to consider look at just changing the application form, that if you're applying under this, then fill this out, otherwise don't fill it out, otherwise. But if you're not applying for an income deferment, whatever, I'm uncomfortable with having that as public information.
Okay.
I would agree.
That's just my take on it.
I mean, that's something at this point, I suppose, since it's not required as part of theirs, I mean, if you wish, we can redact that, I guess, before we file it.
Does the application get recorded, or does a resolution get recorded?
The resolution will, but sometimes you attach the documents, sometimes you don't. It's
I'll talk to Scott. I know this is my first deferment that I've gone through as an administrator, so I've been working pretty closely with him on this.
But I'd be okay with my motion.
Yep.
Redacting it. So, who seconded that?
We haven't yet.
Oh, I just made the motion.
I'll second it.
Okay, Sean seconded it, and then, with that redaction, does that sound okay?
Yeah,
I
I'm
think
comfortable
so, yeah.
either way, because as you said, the resolution doesn't talk about the application.
Okay, any other questions on the assessment deferral? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, motion carries. Okay, general business, personnel policy handbook updates.
Yes, so enclosed in the packet is a summary of updates to the handbook, proposing effective January 1, 2023. The majority of updates are ones with a financial impact that would align with the approved 2023 budget. And then there's some others that are non-financial, so non-budgetary, that are simply to clarify the intent of the handbook. So I did a track changes summary there, just trying to show what was in the handbook is in red and what would replace it in blue with an underline.
So this was really part of the budget
Correct.
issue, trying to bring down the proposed levy.
Well, I guess, what do you,
Well, I just want to say, just because there's several things here that I thought that we've discussed back even when Glenn was still around, that I just had some questions on.
Yep.
So,
yep, so it's possible. So, just going through these, like the first one, the call-in pay, talking about the 15 minutes for electronic. I believe that was approved back in 2018. We've got the minutes from when council discussed and approved that. The reason why it's in here is it looks like when the council did a full overhaul, or like I said, city did a full overhaul of the employee handbook in 2020, somehow that language disappeared out of the handbook. And so, it was brought up to us by one of the employees that just stated, hey, what's the policy here? Like, we're operating under this, but the handbook doesn't actually state that. And so that's where we did some research and figured out, okay, it looks like we approved it in, what was it, May 2018? But it never actually, then when we updated it in 2020, for whatever reason, that language got left out. And so we put that language back in here just to clarify what it was. In terms of standby duty, as you go down, the very next one, that one was us trying to clarify and make less confusing about when standby duty actually is, and talking about you have to be being on call for 7 consecutive days. And then the second part there, where there's a lot of red of stuff that disappeared, matches what we talked about in the budget in terms of increasing the rate from 1 hour per day to 1.5 hours per day during the week, and then the 2 hours per day on the Saturday, Sunday, and holidays. So just that example. So some of this stuff has been talked about in the past, and it's just clarifying in the handbook because for whatever reason, it was left out of the handbook in 2020.
was it left out though because we were discussing it, we were trying to figure out how we were gonna compensate?
I guess it's entirely possible, but we have no record. We dug through records trying to figure out why certain things were left out and certain things weren't. And I guess we have no record as to why it was left out, but we've continued to operate as if it was in there. And so we figured it's better to have it written that we're operating that way than to not have it written in there.
No, and I understand that, but I thought that there's several things here that just kind of stuck out in my mind when I was reading through this.
Yeah.
One was the call-in pay and the 15 minutes. I remember there was discussion about whether or not that was adequate enough for our employees that, if I'm not mistaken, it's just utilities and wastewater that call in, right?
And streets.
Or who uses SCADA or whatever that is, or.
Yeah, I mean, those are the departments I think that would use the electronic means. But I know streets is also utilized as to say, when they get a call and they're able to resolve it with a phone call instead of having to come in and meet with somebody. I know Matt has mentioned that our
Every
streets
department that's on call.
employees have
Refers to
utilized the 15 minutes before.
Okay.
And yeah, so I guess the reason why we're putting it back in here is the only records we can find are back in 2018 when I believe at that time there was 0. They basically had to always come in. And it looked like from what our records that a lot of employees were complaining about always having to come in when we have things like SCADA that have the capability of doing this. And so it looks like from the record that it was basically discussed that, hey, yeah, and we could give them 15 minutes to do it at that point. And I guess talking to Glenn, it sounded like all the employees were real excited about that at that time, because then they wouldn't always have to come in when they could spend 30 seconds on their phone to take care of a problem. And then the council approved the 15 minutes unanimously back in 2018. So that's kind of where we ended up here with the 15 minutes.
But then it never made it into the handbook.
But then for whatever reason, when the 2020 overhaul happened, there's no discussion as to why it didn't appear in the handbook. It just didn't.
Okay, well, it seems to me like I remember the discussion being, they get a call on Saturday at 4 a.m. and, you know, they're awakened and essentially they get a few dollars to go online. And then now they're still up. They might still have to monitor something.
If they're still monitoring, they'd still be on the clock, so they'd still be getting paid. The thing you have to weigh it with is we'd be paying, that 15 minutes is happening whether it's 4 o'clock on a Saturday morning or 5 o'clock on a Tuesday, we'll say early evening. We did have some employees that say, hey, why aren't we compensated 2 hours for this? Well, if they can do it on their phone on a Tuesday evening at 5 o'clock, we're now compensating them for 2 hours when they just picked up their phone, did it, and went back to whatever they were doing.
Well, I don't even know if it was 2 hours. I wanted to say, I thought the discussion was, is that if it happened between, and maybe I'm getting this confused with the police department situation too, but there was like a shift differential that kind of came into play, and everything has to be fair, right? Between the police and the streets and the utilities, and that's kind of always the way that we've operated on, you know, that all employees are gonna get kind of treated similarly. But I thought that the discussion was that if it was between 10 at night and 6 in the morning or something, that they'd at least get a minimum, if they're gonna be awakened in the middle of the night and they get 15 minutes, and it turns out, you know, they get $7, and now you're wide awake, you just were you have to log in, and you should be compensated for an hour, you know, you're just not gonna fall right back asleep again.
I guess I
It was
can't.
very much, it tied in line, it came in line with the shift differential that the police department wanted, that if you worked between 10 and 6 or something, you got an extra
$1 an hour.
or whatever it was.
I guess I can't speak to that since I wasn't here and we weren't
Right,
able
you
to
were,
find any
right.
records of that.
Does this ring a bell to any,
I would just be
Here too,
careful.
But I don't remember it.
I would just, again, reiterate, trying to be careful of trying to take police union stuff and say that all employees have to have it, since the police union might start to feel like, well, they're not paying for our salary, why are we suddenly negotiating for them? But
No, but we did negotiate for your 3%, even though we had agreed to 2.5 with the union, and that we used to follow all that.
No, and I'll fully agree that, but I mean, that wasn't the police union negotiating, that was me recommending it. That was, that's a little bit, but.
But no,
Yeah.
and I know you're new, Josh, but I mean, and I've been on the council 12 years, so I mean,
Yep.
in the general practice is that whatever we negotiated with the police, and I don't wanna get into this because it's already approved and we already did it, so. But the fact of the matter is that everything was supposed to be fair, and I don't think 15 minutes is really fair between 10 and 6 if there's a shift differential for, you know, the police department or maybe, you know, utilities or whatever else, as long as the departments are the same. But I think there should be a minimum there that's an hour, and I don't wanna put, because we're worried about a few $1,000s in that budget. I mean, there was a lot of other things we could have looked at than targeting individual employees or individual, whether it's utilities or wastewater or streets, then,
True, I mean.
or parks even for that
Yeah,
matter.
I mean, one of the tricky things we're looking at too, is I know that for a lot of these employees, that the city is paying for, cell phones that basically have the capability to do this. And a lot of those employees will use those cell phones for their personal use, since we do have an agreement that all employees can take advantage of that. I believe it's for a small dollar amount, isn't it, that you're able to use your work phone for your personal use. And I know that we upgraded their phones at that point, because a lot of these employees before that, because all they needed was, we'll say, the standard flip phone that apparently Gen Xers are going back to. While those phones didn't have the capability of doing this work from home. So I think that the cost the city puts into giving these employees basically upgraded phones then needs to be taken into account as well, because generally the city only provided phones that you would actually need for work. And
Right, and I'm glad you brought cell phones up too, all of a sudden out of the blue, because that reminds me of something else. Is everybody pay the same for their cell phones? Every city employee?
I believe so, assuming that they use that cell phone for work, or they're assuming that they use that phone for personal use. Like myself, I've got completely separate. I've got a personal phone that I think 2 employees have, just in case for some reason they can't get a hold of me on my work phone. But
Sure.
for those employees that use their work phone as their personal phone, there's a set flat rate, correct, Robin? I believe.
I believe so, unless there's yeah, I believe so, unless there's, some type of upgrade or something, but everybody should have the flat amount that.
Okay, I just want to double check, because I thought I remember asking that question one other time, and I don't know if I ever got an answer, but I don't want to go too far on that. So, and I don't know if we want to address each one of these individually with the council on what they think is fair or right, or if I should go on to the second paragraph, which is the standby duty. And I'll just tell a story. I ran into a city employee at Ace Hardware, in the middle of the day, and I made some thing. I said, "Oh, you must be here picking up something for the city," as we were chit-chatting. He said, "No, with the snow or whatever, we're sent home during the day and then brought back." And I thought we had agreed that we were gonna approve, overtime, because it wasn't really fair for them, if I remember right. But they were given a Tuesday, come in and work Saturday, and it could have been Christmas Eve with your family and whatever else to plow snow, which needs to get done, and they understand that. But then to save money, they were given off half of a day on Tuesday or whatever. Do that.
So you're probably referring
5
to,
days later, which now Grandma and Grandpa have gone home, the kids are back at school, and now I'm sitting at home on a Tuesday. That used to be a big issue.
yeah. And
That Maggie, remember that, that we addressed?
so I'm assuming you must have talked to an employee sometime within the last couple months.
Right.
So I would say, yeah, in that situation, and I know I've worked very closely with Matt on these, we've had a couple snow events where the snow is falling in just a way that it is entirely possible that if we'd had them here from beginning of their shift until we got done plowing, that we'd have employees working 22, 26, maybe a 30-hour shift. And we basically felt we had to make a safety call at that point, because the minute we have an employee on hour 28 of their shift hit a car or hit a person, now suddenly we're getting, well, why is this employee working 28 straight hours? And so in an attempt to give the employee some rest and to try to rest their body, what they do at that time is, I guess, up to them. 12, 16 hours into shift, we're saying, hey, go home for 4 hours, rest yourself, take a nap, eat, whatever you gotta do, and then please come back and we'll continue. But we didn't feel like it was a safety issue that we should allow these employees to work such long hours driving such big pieces of
Right,
equipment.
and that makes perfect sense, and don't get me wrong, the employee wasn't complaining
Yep.
at this point.
Yeah.
It just stuck in my mind that I thought we took care of that, and we were gonna compensate you at time and a half for if you worked an 8-hour shift, but then you had to work an extra 4 hours plowing from 6 till 10 or whatever.
And I guess we haven't done the time and a half that way. I mean, we've allowed employees then to continue working throughout the week, so that way, if they want to accrue that overtime at the end of the week, they can. But I know we've also allowed, Matt has basically said, hey, if anyone wants to go home, like, we're not gonna make you stay here at that point if you put your 40 in. I think we've had a couple employees take advantage of that as well.
Does that need to be drawn up differently though? Because that's not how I read this.
Well, I will add to that. I've never in the last month sent an employee home to avoid overtime. So
Okay.
that needs to be clarified first.
Okay,
I
well,
have-
no, thank you for clarifying
But the
that.
guys come in at 7:30 in the morning and they work until 3:45.
Yeah,
There's
The
nothing
last-
wrong for doing that, though.
What was that?
There's nothing wrong with doing that if the case
And
merits.
I think that's a conversation we need to have, because I know it, as Sean said, 5-6 years ago, I think the council verbally stated to administration that you will not send people home to avoid overtime. And so that's kind of the guise that has been operated under. Agreeably, Bruce, that's not something I've ever done. I know all my past jobs, we have sent people home to
I'm
avoid
not sure it's a
paying
very
overtime.
prudent way to financially run a city.
And,
But-
yeah,
But you are correct. In 2018, the council did approve that we cannot send guys home to avoid overtime like we used to. If people had their 40 hours in on Friday, we would send them home, which, again, I was the supervisor at the time. It was not a great job to tell people, hey, thanks for putting in all those hours, now go home. So the council at that time approved that we cannot send guys home to avoid the 40. But in this scenario, like I was saying, if they come in at 7:30 and they're working until 3:45, the snow stops at 4 o'clock. Now I'm asking the guys to work from 7:30 to 4 o'clock. And now I'm saying, go plow for the next 8 hours. And if we can get Main Street done on top of that, now you're gonna be here until 8 the next morning. I can't live with myself saying, hey, you guys, I had an opportunity to send you home for 5-6 hours during the day. Instead, I'm making you work 24 hours straight. And if you hit somebody, I can't live with myself because I had that opportunity to send you home. I don't think it's safe to have somebody working for that long a period of time. And I explained to those guys, were they all happy? Absolutely not, because they thought I was trying to avoid overtime. But I explained to them, no, that's not. It's public safety.
Right, well, and that makes
Isn't
perfect
it even
sense.
more strict than that, though? I'm sorry to break in here, with your conversation, but, doesn't MnDOT have requirements on after 40 taking 10 hours off?
I would have to look into MnDOT's exact requirements.
Probably OSHA. if
OSHA,
anybody-
Yeah, I mean,
No,
OSHA,
I'm
that's what-
talking MnDOT. These are truck drivers.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that
I
is,
think
yeah,
there's some requirements for heavy equipment.
Yeah,
they're exempt,
definitely.
they're exempt.
Well, I'm
I
just,
guess I would review that because
Because that's
if
the way it is,
anybody's
that's the
working
law.
20 hours, I'm totally against that.
I
Yeah,
would,
so-
I wouldn't wanna be
Safe.
behind, I wouldn't be by a
Hold on.
driver that's been driving 20 hours.
I don't either. Yeah, that's not what I'm saying.
Then-
But the thing came down to being fair and what we were trying to get away from and what stuck out to me in talking, this employee was not complaining. Like I said, it was just a general conversation.
comment.
I was like, oh, but I thought the idea is that if we are going to, and I don't know what the right verbiage is, but we were sending people home, not because of safety issues, but because of budgetary issues. We didn't want to pay time and a half. And it equated to $6,000 or $8,000 a year, but it didn't make sense for these guys. I was getting grief from city employees back in 2018 that I get called in because of snow on Christmas Eve, and it happened actually that Christmas Eve. Have to leave the family and go plow, which is their job, and they understand that. That's part of having the job. But then instead of getting time and a half, they worked their 4 or 6 hours on Christmas Eve. Then they were given, okay, you can have Tuesday off. Well, by that time, that's not fair. So the idea is that we would allow these guys to get time and a half. So if Matt wants to send them home for 3 hours so they can rest up or do whatever, maybe they should be compensated for that time at time and a half. Or compensated just even at regular time or something, be compensated for that, because it's not their fault when the snow falls and when it doesn't.
Right.
But it's the idea of being fair to these guys, and you're right, I don't want them
I don't
working
even know how,
22
yeah, a
hours
lot of
straight.
that's legal. I mean, on the holidays, you usually get double time.
I will say,
And then,
we do
when
have,
after 40, when I got my A-class license, after 40 hours, you have to rest.
I will say, Sean, for about the holidays, we do have premium pay in our policy where if you do work on a holiday, you'll get double time for working on that holiday. Just to answer your Christmas Eve
Right.
example. So I don't know
Right.
how it was paid in 2018, but now for some reason you got called in on Christmas Eve.
Okay.
We would pay you double for that regardless of how much time you've put in up to that point.
Well, again, when I read through this,
Yeah.
it stuck in my mind. I was like, I thought we got rid of that policy about sending people home and then giving them comp time or whatever
And yeah,
else.
so that is where we have operated under, since 2018, it sounds like, that we don't send people home to avoid overtime.
Okay,
But to answer your question, Bruce, this is the first place I've worked that has operated such a way as well. I know.
Well, I would certainly be open to reconsidering that because it's tough for administration to manage employment costs if you don't have that flexibility to manage your staff. But more importantly, I'm not sure if we have guidelines for the number of hours somebody can work, but I'm really surprised I'm hearing somebody might be a possibility somebody works 20 hours straight. That, to me, that's totally unacceptable, especially if they're doing any kind of equipment or driving. I mean, I worked a whole day and it's not safe at all. So I don't know if that's just a rare occurrence, but,
Yeah, it does not happen too often.
I mean,
would
does
say
someone
we-
ever work more than 12 hours?
Yes, every year, every snowstorm, or the last 2 snowstorms, the guys have worked more than 12. They've been in between that 14 and 15.
Yeah.
But again, it would have been 20 if we did not send them home.
Yeah, I think there
So-
should be a guideline or something.
So I think the guys worked 15
everyone
hours at
understands
one
that.
time, and then actually, I sent them home and had the line department actually plow streets on that 20-inch snowfall we had. To give those guys, I think they went home for 6 hours, and then they came back, did Main Street. So, yeah, I mean, we avoid 20-hour workdays. I mean, it doesn't happen very often.
Right, but 16 might be too many too. I don't know what the proper number is for health and safety, but
Well, we can
I
definitely
do think that
research
should be
into that.
looked at. 16 seems too long to me, myself too, but.
Right, yeah, I'm
Yeah,
sure
you
that
look
they're,
it up, because if I do, I already know, I know I'm right, because I had to get my license. You know,
16's OSHA.
Yeah,
Is it?
I used to work at Seneca, and that's when they kick you out.
okay.
yeah, I
Okay.
would suspect that there are some guidelines, because I know for even over-the-road truck drivers, there's very strict guidelines for the number of hours behind the wheel.
sure.
And don't get me wrong, Bruce, if anybody's a budget hawk, I am, and I like saving taxpayers' money. So I just didn't wanna put something on the backs of them, so we didn't take a look at other things that we could have cut to keep that levy down. And now all of a sudden, we're gonna, like I said, I was just surprised that I thought we had handled this policy before. We were gonna be fair to our employees, just like we were the police officers, and make sure they got shift differentials or whatever, or the opportunity for overtime, because some of these guys would like time and a half and have no problem working an extra 4 hours after 8 hours, or an extra 6 hours, maybe to 14 hours, in order to make some more money. And I just wanna make sure that our priority isn't to take things away from some of the employees so we can hit other things for other employees. And that's the question that I was getting at, so.
Could you get back to us on that? Because I really don't wanna let that go. If there's guys out there working 30 hours driving, plow, I don't want no part of it.
Yeah, we can definitely, we'll look into that and what general guidelines are, and even if we have to adapt our policy a little bit about number of hours worked and.
Please write it down good and clear so that this confusion doesn't happen next time.
Or stagger maybe half the crew goes home and the other half, then they swap out, and maybe we determine that there's a priority, like snow emergency routes. There's plenty of
Yep.
cities that have snow emergency routes. Those get plowed first, just so we can, half the crew goes home at this time, and then they flip-flop the next time. They work at night, the other ones work during the day. I mean, there's a lot of
Yeah,
options.
yeah, we'll explore that and see what we can figure out.
So, okay, now I got something else, though.
But I would like
this
to put it
thing.
on record, that is what I have been doing.
What?
So they don't work more than 15, 16 hours. I'm trying to keep it at that 12 to 14. It's not like I'm saying, work 20 hours, then I'll send you home for 6. Exactly what you guys are asking is what I am doing.
and that's
So
great,
I want to
Matt.
make sure that's on record, that
No,
Matt's
oh.
not working them 20 hours straight. No, that's exactly
No,
what
and
I'm
nobody
not
ever
doing.
said you were working them 20 hours
Well-
straight. It was that you were giving them time off, or that you were sending them home and then expecting them to come back later, and they were missing an opportunity for time and a half, which I thought we were gonna put into the budget. But it seems like that maybe isn't quite accurate, so that was just me, and like I said, I just found it odd that,
Yep.
because I thought this was taken care of, and then it just so happened that it popped up here on this.
Josh, Matt, get it in writing.
Now we'll figure it out. for you.
Thank you.
So, the other thing was leave of absence, and I noticed that it was, we didn't include aunts and uncles in that, or, I mean, if they're gonna attend a funeral.
Yep, so it was one of those things where, as we pieced it apart, we realized that we could just keep making the list longer and longer and longer and longer about different people who could be granted to attend funerals. I mean, you could include aunt and uncles. Do you include cousins? Do you include, well, you know, I had this family that lived next to me for a number of years, and they were like my father, like, because my dad wasn't there, like. And so at some point, we figured we have to be able to cut this off somewhere. What we did do with leave is we removed the to attend the funeral, only because there are some people who, I mean, people grieve in their own way. And so we figured we aren't going to force you to basically attend a funeral to get leave. If maybe your way of grieving is going and sitting on a dock and fishing because you and so used to go fish all the time, and that's where you remember them. So that was the purpose of removing it. But I said with the aunts and uncles or cousins or whatnot, like, you got to draw that line somewhere at some point. And so we kind of took what we thought we could figure out to be kind of just industry standard of language that's used in most other places.
Oh, okay. It was varied from my policy that included aunts and uncles, so that's why I brought that up, but.
Oh, really? And it's one of those things too where I also very much leave it up to my department heads. Like, if someone were to come to me and say, hey, or someone were to come to Matt or Robin and say, hey, my uncle was like a father, like, can I get a day of leave? I give that discretion to where the department card, like, is allowed to, I mean, they're their employees, and if you wanna let them go for a day or two, that's up to
Be
you.
very careful about that, because the policy doesn't allow that,
Okay,
you know? And that's the type of thing that gets talked about in the employee circles then, that, well, I wasn't granted that, I didn't even feel comfortable in asking it, but so-and-so got it, so.
That's a good point.
I mean, if your policy says you don't do it, you don't do it.
okay.
Well,
My
that's,
take on it, but obviously, you're the city administrator.
well, that's written, and I was gonna say, there's plenty of people on this council and, in management that know how close, I mean, this is a tight-knit community, right? I mean,
Yep.
everybody's related to everybody, and
Yep.
they see each other from the time they're growing up, and there are some people that are really tight with their aunts and uncles and cousins, and it's just, you know.
Yeah.
So I
think
just
they're
didn't wanna
still
leave.
allowed time off. It just wouldn't necessarily be a bereavement
leave.
pay for consistency. Yeah, so they'd still be able to use vacation time, or if they didn't have vacation time available, you know, unpaid time. So they're still allowing for the time off, just,
Right, I'm just trying to determine on what is the right connection that they would be compensated for, again.
We just, when I was working for the county, I bet you it was 2 years before we retired, before they put the brother and sister-in-law in there. Otherwise, it was anything above that, like, and aunts and uncles and stuff weren't included, so.
Okay. And then I just wanted to go over the employee reimbursements too, and I don't know if we need to break that down all individually or what, if we wanna discuss each one of them, or if the rest of the council just wants to run it through here, but, so the money's going from, what is it, from I can't. read it, I don't know.
275.
275 to 350, is that correct?
Correct.
And does that include, do they need to show receipts for that stuff, or is it just, do they get a one-time payment
So
for that amount?
there used to be a combination of showing receipts and not, and now we are just making it a flat amount without.
So that, they get $350, but they don't necessarily have to go out and buy new boots or new work
Correct,
pants.
but if they show up to work with really shoddy boots or really shoddy pants or shirt, we can say, hey, you need to go change it, and well, why don't, we just gave you $350, you should have money to be able to do
Okay,
that.
so it's really more of a, not necessarily a safety issue, it's more of the way they're presenting themselves to
It's
the
basically
public.
presenting yourself as well as, yeah.
Which I'm all for,
Having clean clothes and whatnot, yeah, I guess that'd be presenting yourself, as I say it out loud.
Okay,
And if you use it for other things and not uniforms, like we always got a uniform allowance at the county, if we didn't keep our uniform or up to par, you couldn't go back, well, sorry, I bought a gun and I used up my uniform allowance. Too bad, so sad, take it out of your pocket.
I'll say, yeah, if you have holes in your shirt and we asked you to go put on a clean shirt, you either need to buy yourself a shirt then, or use your money to go towards your shirts.
okay, I was just kinda curious on how they allocate that, but, and then the 350, is that, I couldn't remember what we did with the police, but again, in the idea of fairness,
Yep, so the police is actually much higher than that, I believe, only in that, cause they have very specialized uniforms that they have to wear in terms of whatnot.
and
so
it's-
I believe,
they're
I don't know the
expensive.
exact number, I believe they're over $1,000 that we give to the police.
Huh?
Yeah, it's a little over $1,000, I think we give each police officer every year.
does that include the equipment, like, that they have to,
I think
we
so.
provide bulletproof vests and things like that,
Yeah.
right? That's not over and above their uniform, though.
Correct, so yeah, things like the bulletproof vests and whatnot, I believe we provide out, but yeah, I mean, you're talking about the shirts and the pants and the.
So I'll give you an example. $50 for a pair of pants, $55 for a shirt, and then you gotta pay for all the stuff to be put on.
Okay,
So a set of uniform might cost you $125, just one set.
okay.
So, that's how, and
I suppose then you're looking at
uniform
boots, too,
business
and-
is such
yeah.
a racket. It's
And that would include jackets, so your winter wear,
jackets,
your.
yep, your winter
yep.
wear, whatever, gloves.
But
you
the
know.
street department would have to have winter coats and safety coats and,
Do we provide them safety coats and stuff, Matt, or like coats during the winter?
That's part of their, $350.
Okay. So I guess looking at that too, because if you look at this, this year, for the first time, we're also buying shirts basically for every employee. So they should have, because we figured out that we can buy bulk T-shirts or long sleeve T-shirts for much cheaper than an employee could. And so we are providing, on top of the 350 employees, new shirts every year. So that should be basically taken care of for them. That would be the second inner bullet point under the one you're talking about there.
Well, I don't know if I guess I'd like to find out what the other council, if we go back to the step one, the call-in pay, if 15 minutes is adequate enough to get somebody up out of bed at 3 AM that might only take them 15 minutes, but now they're wide awake, you know? I mean, I don't know if it's a minimum hour or if we do the shift differential from 10 to 6. Somewhere there, I think it should be at least an hour compensation, and maybe it's only an hour, maybe it's 15 minutes up until 10, but if it's in the middle of the night, 10 to 6, that maybe they get compensated for an hour instead of anybody that has to use SCADA, because they get paid, if they call in, they get a minimum of 2 hours, right? If they have to go in.
If they come into the facility that they're looking at, then it's a minimum of 2 hours, correct?
Okay. What does everybody else feel? Different? No?
No, I'm fine with that. What you just said. I agree, I should say.
Which one? He
With
said
the
2.
1
Just the
hour.
call-in pay.
With the call-in pay for.
Well, I mean, but he mentioned
From
2
10 to
scenarios
6.
there with the call-in pay.
I just threw it out for discussion. I
Yeah.
mean, maybe it should be just 10 to 6. I mean, if it's 3 o'clock on a Saturday and you're sitting there watching the ball game and you can go on your laptop and hit a few buttons and solve the problem.
I guess before I would want to change it, I would want to understand how often does this actually occur and what are the timeframes that it really does happen? Because once you go past a certain time point, you're getting paid. This is just requiring a minimum of 15 minutes. So if you're taking care of a situation on the phone, it takes you half an hour, you get paid a half an hour, right?
Yeah,
Correct.
that is correct, right? Okay.
Correct, yeah, so it's a minimum of 15 minutes, but obviously if you work more than that, we'd pay. Because I know we had one employee said, well, you know, I had to check it, and, you know, 20 minutes later, check again. Well, we're paying you for all of that time then that you were technically working.
Okay.
I don't know how often this occurs, or is this?
And I believe
are we
Matt
making
had that
payments-
number at one point.
Are we making payments every day on this issue?
I would say at least, it probably averages out every other week. I would say majority of them do happen before 10 o'clock. There's not too, I did keep track. I left 2022, I don't have the exact number. I thought it was like 6 to 8 calls were in the middle of the night. But this was designed for that if you get an alarm, that you can go on your SCADA and pretty much just clear the alarm or take a look at it. It's usually a 1 or 2 minute deal and then you're done. If it's one of those 15, 20 minute deals, we expect you probably come to the plant because there's more than just a look at the SCADA, and you're not usually look at the SCADA for 15, 20 minutes. It's one of those, hey, I can just clear alarm or I can adjust something and you're done. So it was never designed for you to be sitting on your phone for 15, half hour, 45. If that's the case, they're expected to come in and take care of the issue.
So did I hear you to say that it happens about 6, 7 times every 2 weeks?
No.
Or throughout 2 weeks?
Every other week, they probably get a call in that they can take care of on SCADA, that they can take care of it on their phone. But I think I calculated 6 to 8 of them in 2020 were overnight in between that 8 or 10 o'clock. and
Oh,
6
it's a fairly rare occurrence.
Yeah, so there
doesn't happen too often on,
roughly 30 with maybe 6 during this nighttime.
it doesn't happen to the waste treatment plant a lot, but I will tell you, if you go to that route, it will be very expensive on the street department. I have my employee that calls all the guys in. He'll get up 3, 4 times a night to check roads. Something I used to do, probably the least thing I liked about my job the most.
What do you mean? You'd get up to check? Like
Someone's
over
gotta
a
call the
snow
guys
event,
in.
or-
Oh, yeah, yes.
Oh, no, I just thought maybe you drove to see, you know, if you,
Like last night.
If there was
my
flooding or something, or-
Street supervisor had to get up twice in the middle of the night, and he actually drove streets to see if they were starting to freeze over yet.
okay.
So, yeah, no,
But
I'm
that's
saying-
not a call-in situation.
no.
That's just a regular hourly pay situation.
Depends on, yeah,
So I guess when you look at the definition, they would be basically coming to work outside of their normal workday due to something happening, such as a snow event. I guess I would consider that someone checking on snow to be no different than somebody checking on the plant when an alarm goes off. Knowing when are we gonna
Right,
start the
and
plowing.
neither of those would be call-in in my definition. You're not being called in, that's part of the duties of your job, and you get paid overtime or whatever whatever you get paid.
Well, I mean, that's kind of what the call-in that we're talking about right now, though. If for some reason outside of normal work hours, 7 to 4 for the streets guys, or the 10-hour shifts the wastewater guys have, that you have to perform some work-related incident, I guess we'll say.
Yeah, and to me, the difference is call-in is somebody from the city or the alarm system is contacting you. The other part is part of your job, and you're taking the action, the activity to do the work or to get out of bed and do the work, and you get paid your regular overtime to do that. A minimum of 2 hours to do that, whether you're driving the roads or whatever. That's how I would understand that.
Yeah, but this isn't what it says. Like, if you get a chick in the SCADA, you only get paid 15 minutes.
But you're still getting up out of bed to go to log in and do the work. And I'm not saying it needs to be 2 hours. 15 minutes doesn't seem like.
It's a minimum of 15 minutes.
Yeah, and I will say, I mean, in terms of logging in, it is on the phone. I would guess most of them, and not saying that they're not up, but it's not a matter of getting out of bed and going finding your computer and it's a matter of picking up your phone and looking at it drearily while you're like trying to get your eyes to adjust. So I mean, I would guess many of them. I shouldn't say that, but I would assume that many of them probably don't get too far from their bed at that point either. So. Not that they're not wide awake, because I mean, I wake up sometimes and think about something that I said 2 weeks ago, and now I'm awake for 4 hours, but.
So I understand the differentiation, Bruce, that you bring up about getting paged or getting called, because of a situation that is not normal an alarm is going off and someone has to take a look at it. Whereas if someone is getting up to take a look at the streets to determine if crew needs to be out to sand or whatever, that would be part of their job responsibilities, and by all means, they would get paid for that, and in all likelihood, it would be overtime pay. Is that a fair assessment, Matt?
That's where I'm asking, are you talking about giving that person 2 hours? Because he's the person that's coming in, driving the streets for 10, 15 minutes, then he comes home, calls the guys in, and then goes back to bed. But again, I used to do this for 8 years. There's nights that you would do it you'd set your alarm for 2 o'clock. Man, snow is supposed to be done, it's still snowing. Set it for 3:30, still snowing. So there's times that person is getting up 4 or 5. I mean, I feel bad more for him than what we're talking about, the waste treatment plant doing it a couple times throughout the year. I feel bad for that guy that's doing it 6 months out of the year.
So
He
would
should
you,
be more compensated than anybody else. And to be honest with you, he never usually does get compensated because he always says, I'm not writing that down. It's not a big deal.
so that would be considered perhaps standby duty because there is an event going on and that individual needs to sort of be on standby or on call to make a decision with regards to the streets, using this example.
Yeah, and I think he should be compensated for that,
absolutely.
actually.
So for 6 months, he'll be on standby daily?
Well,
or-
just, I mean, yeah, if he needs to, just for snow events, or, I don't know, maybe you're not looking for water main breaks, but it could be in the summer, and it could be heavy rain, and he might wanna drive the streets to make sure that the holding ponds aren't flooding or plugged, or, that, we always have flooding down here on Main Street. I just wanna make sure they're being compensated fairly and equally amongst the departments.
So I guess, and that, I mean, I'm advocating one way or the other. We have we recommend in here. I would guess the tough thing you say about fairly is that, are you paying someone to be awake or are you paying someone to do work? And so, cause you might get arguments from some people, well, I had to come in and work for an hour to get my hour of pay, but he only had to work for 2 minutes. And I'm not saying one way or the other, but I can just foresee that coming up as well, as some people saying, well, why do I have to work for a full hour to get paid and they only have to work for 2 minutes to get a full hour?
No, I don't know if it's 2 minutes, but I mean.
But yeah, I mean, in
What's
terms
the
of
difference,
this
if you have a rotating shift schedule, but, I wanna take all the 10 till 6. But, cause
yep.
I want the extra $2 an hour or $3 an hour, or whatever the shift differential was.
So, and correct me if I'm wrong, Matt, every single person who would be generally getting call-in pay is already getting standby duty pay, correct?
That is
Because-
correct.
So they're, in this proposal, they're already getting paid an extra hour and a half a day just for being available to answer the phone. And so while they may only get 15 minutes of time for the actual incident, they are still collecting an hour and a half just to be available.
Okay.
And so, I mean, that is then taking a single incident every 2 weeks, we're now paying you, for that particular day and that particular call, an hour 45, I guess. if you
Oh,
wanna
that's
do
not
it.
really, I guess, I didn't read that or
I
understand
didn't,
that.
either did I.
Now, this is taken out of context. I mean, we're just clarifying, so, you know,
Yep.
we're trying to figure this out within the flow of the whole document.
Yeah, I mean, I think these call-in duty and standby pay, I guess it doesn't particularly say that to receive call-in pay, you'll be on standby duty, but generally the person on standby duty is the one that is always getting all the phone calls. Or the SCADA incidents or whatever those are as well. So, yeah, we pay one person from each of those departments a set rate just to make themselves available.
And they rotate through, right? Everybody.
Yeah, and to not get too far away. I know we've heard that from other employees. I think there was one streets guy who was like, I wanted to go to the cabin this week, but I'm on call, or I'm on standby duty this week, so I have to be within 30 minutes of the city.
So they're gonna get an hour and a half just for being on set, even if they never take one call.
Correct, yeah, just to basically inconvenience their lives to be
Okay.
available.
And 2 hours on
Yeah, so yeah, they get an hour and a half a day and then 2 hours on the weekends to be available of pay. And then plus that 15 minutes would be, or a minimum of 15 minutes would be any event that actually happens.
So it's just not the 15 minutes. There's an
It's
hour
just
and a
not
half.
15 minutes, there is
Okay.
that standby duty that
Okay.
we're paying them to inconvenience their lives.
Okay.
That makes me feel better.
Can I clarify something else on that then?
Yeah.
So if you do not, if your schedule or you're not on for 7 days, you don't get any standby pay?
So standby duty, we do on a week-by-week basis, and so let's say this week Matt's on standby. He officially is on standby from, was it Saturday to Friday, or however you guys roll? that
Friday,
schedule?
7:30 to Friday, 7:30.
Okay, yeah, so basically, we're defining this is when you're on standby, just to get away from an employee saying, well, you know, I was around, and so they could have called me, so maybe I should get the pay too. This is just defining what exactly we mean by standby duty, when this individual from each department is getting that allotment of pay.
So no, there's never a case then where somebody's on standby for less than 7 days in a row?
I don't believe so.
No, there are times that the guys will like, hey, I got something that came up on Tuesday, can you cover for me? So he might not be on call that day because someone's covering him because something came up where he's going to the Vikings game on Sunday.
So then he loses his 7 days then?
He doesn't, because really that's still his responsibility, I think, is when it comes back to it. If for some reason I asked Matt to cover for me, because I was going to a Vikings game and I was on standby duty, and Matt doesn't cover, that's now gonna come back on me because I was the one technically on standby duty.
So every employee has standby duty, including the department heads.
I mean, in those
Well, I'm
departments.
on call 24/7, so is Josh. I mean, honestly, we are.
I mean, quite
We're
honestly, yeah, I mean,
expected to
I
answer our
receive
phone.
calls at all time and I don't get paid for it. That's just part of being an exempt employee.
Was one of my questions. This just applies to non-exempt employees?
This applies to non-exempt employees, specifically the streets, wastewater, and utilities departments, who we will call into work, for those instances. I would expect that if for some
Parks
reason,
isn't included in that for some reason?
They are not yet, but that probably will happen the next
Should
couple
that be
years.
spelled out here so that it's very specific to which employees? Because otherwise,
so we do say under standby duty that duty personnel for the public works
oh, I see.
and utility
department,
departments.
Okay.
So as of right now, like Matt said, parks are not, but it may become a thing very soon in the future. I would expect that if we had to call somebody outside of those departments, say Barb, for instance, to come in, that we would compensate her accordingly for having to come into work. And I would just expect, hopefully, my department heads would think long and hard about calling somebody who isn't on standby, because their job duties don't expect them to come to work, so we shouldn't expect them to make themselves available.
So I get the wastewater and utilities and the street department as far as like plowing or water main breaks or whatever, but what would the parks that you're thinking about adding them, what scenario would be an instance that they'd have to, like a tree down or something?
They would have had that one this weekend that someone left some stuff in the warming house when it got locked up. So we got paged on Saturday night. The street department takes the parks pages right now. So the street
does.
department took that call to get the warming house opened up so that person can get his item out.
Okay,
Plus,
The
again,
outdoor one?
In the summertime, I can think of a busted toilet in one of the bathrooms.
Oh, okay.
Or
Yep. We'll get
just all kinds of stuff like that.
10 to 15 right now are parks pages that the street department takes. I'm just roughly guessing.
Sure.
I think we get roughly 30 to 40 pages on the street department total for all public work aspects.
But you'd be thinking of doing it for the whole 52 weeks a year, standby pay for parks?
I mean,
I think in the future we talked, maybe in the next 3-4 years,
I
if
mean,
it gets to that point.
I think it really comes down to how much it'd be needed. If we have a streets guy showing up every single night for a parks call, then maybe you need to have a parks person on call instead of having another department and have to chip in. You'd really look at the actual usage to determine if it would be needed.
And I don't think the department is quite to the point where I don't think it's fair for every 3 weeks to someone be on call. It's only 3 staff members. It used to be 2, and I'm never asking someone to do it every other week to be on call.
right.
So, and they can't be in the rotation of the street department. There's a lot of stuff that the street department, jetting sewers, and some of those questions that the parks has nothing to do with. So,
Sure.
again, that day probably will happen.
Anything else, Sean?
No, other than the fact that if OSHA's 16 hours, I don't know if we cap it at 16 or if we.
We'll look at that.
I just wanna make sure it's not a big issue to, and again, the employee that I talked to wasn't complaining at all. It just seemed like it struck me like I thought we weren't doing this policy anymore and that
Because he got sent home.
we wanted to make sure that they were getting it, but Matt explained it now, so I get.
And we'll look at that OSHA plus MnDOT stuff just to make sure that we are, 1, complying, and 2, to see if there's any additional language we may need to add to the handbook just to clarify that you may be upset that we're sending you home, but our city insurance actually requires that we have to give you a 6-hour break or something like that.
Yeah.
What is your take? Is there, was there a substantial number of employees that are upset with that, or?
I mean, I think, and I wasn't there, I didn't speak to the employees, maybe Matt can speak better. From what he told me, there were a few employees that, great, I almost wanna go home, I'm tired, or if he gives them the opportunity at the end of a week like that they'll take it. But then there's always some employees, generally they tend to be your employees that maybe are single or younger or whatnot, and just wanna work, that they're always gonna expect more overtime. I mean, I know when I was in college and I worked a job that had overtime, we'd get upset when we'd get sent home because when am I gonna go home? Like, sit on the couch and drink beer, I might as well sit here and make some money. But obviously that was the discretion of my boss at that time, was whether they wanted to send me home or not. So, I mean, I think you're always gonna get employees who are really upset. It'd be interesting to go back and talk to the employees a few weeks after the fact, just now that they're not specifically thinking about that situation. How do you feel about it? I just think sometimes you also have to make a business decision per se, whether it's safety or budget, in that instance. And so, like Matt said, he made these decisions based off a safety thing, and I totally supported him. Like we've all said, like we don't
makes
want
sense.
anyone out there at that, or for that length of time.
Right, I just, again, I wanna make sure it's fair across all the departments, and, cause that's the way we've generally worked, and this seems like it was a unique situation that maybe.
And I think we've had actually 2 of them this year that it just so happens how the snow events have happened and been sustained over long periods of time, that we've just run into it a couple times this year where we've had to send people home for a couple hours.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I remember in 2018, it was
It was
much
the other
bigger an
way,
issue.
yeah.
There was a lot of employees that were unhappy with the way that it was being done. and,
Yeah, again, this is completely different scenario. That was
got
us,
it.
literally me sending them home on a Friday because they had 40 hours in. Those
Right.
guys that all got sent home for 6 hours, 8 hours to get rest, they all still put in 50 hours those weeks. So it's not like we were avoiding overtime by no means. And I think when I explained to them, I'm not sending you guys home to avoid overtime. I'm sending you home because it's not safe for you guys to be working that many hours in a row. None of them enjoyed it, but I think they hopefully understood that, hey, something happened to somebody. How could we live with ourselves that I had
Absolutely.
the opportunity to send you home and you guys didn't go home? That I think they understood. It's just
Okay,
I think they were frustrated that they thought I was going back to the old way, and I had to explain to them, no, that's not what this is. It's public safety 100%.
okay.
Well, if you could bring us back information on that topic, so we understand how you land, what the OSHA requirements actually are, and what
And-
our guidelines are gonna be on that?
Yeah, and it's possible that we may even just put something in the handbook too about it generally, so.
And MinDOT is gonna be even lower than OSHA. I know they are. Try it.
Yeah, I would
Let
be
me know.
interested in knowing what MinDOT is as well, because
Yeah, we'll look at them, we can look at see what the two counties do.
this is
or
more
what surrounding
dangerous than
cities may do as
semi
well.
over-the-road trucking.
Yes,
So what,
especially if you hit a guy in a wheelchair and he's got a gun.
what were you looking at to get out of this tonight? Just
So
update us?
we were looking for approval of what we have presented you to basically update our employee handbook.
Okay.
This evening and, whether, yeah, and so I mean, you guys have discussed it. We were looking to approve the red lines that Robin has presented to you.
Okay.
Oh, go ahead.
I just had
Blue
one,
lines and red crossouts, however.
Yeah,
I just had one other quick question then,
Yep.
is there any other issue? I mean, this was just one little section of the employee handbook. Is there anything else that has come out or that we need to address? And I'm not trying to micromanage the department heads and city, executive staff, but yet I still want to get ahead of it so we don't turn into a 2018 where there was a lot of pushback and talk about forming unions and all kinds of stuff.
Yep, so I mean, I will say that a lot of this stuff has actually come through the suggestion box. And I've got quite a lengthy list, some of which I mean, there's a lot of stuff we have ongoing through there. I just sent an email to all employees, kind of updating them on what I consider to be successful. Maybe they don't because their bring your dog to work day didn't get put into the whole thing. The other thing that I actually saw a few suggestions on, and I had to get legal confirmation on this. And I think I know the departments that recommended it, and so I tried to explain to them. We had questions on like, well, why don't we make all holidays floating holidays? It actually came up more times than you would think. And it's actually state requirement that we have holidays on the days that they're on. And so, I don't know if there've been any overwhelming ones. I'll look back through my notes and maybe update you guys in an email and something like that. I'm a little leery sometimes about releasing all the suggestions to everybody because there may be stuff like the holiday one where all of a sudden I get a bunch of employees that go, yeah, that would be a great idea. And so suddenly I'm now, instead of having to explain to 3 people why we can't do this, I'm explaining to 52 people over and over and again that the state won't allow me to do it. So I can actually email you guys if you want my full breakdown of all my suggestions and where we're at.
No,
with them.
I don't want to I'm not trying to micromanage. I
Yeah.
think you got a handle on it. I just want to make sure we don't get to a point where we were 5, 6 years ago where departments were
Correct.
pointing at each other and morale
So-
was being affected and
Yep, so the only other
talk
one
of
that you guys,
unions and,
the only other one you guys might see, and we're still working through the possibilities of it, is we've had a couple employees ask over and over again about potentially accruing comp time. I worked over, what if I don't want to collect overtime, what if I'd rather collect that as comp time?
That's
So-
banking.
Huh?
Isn't that banking hours? Can you even do that?
no,
I mean, that's basically what it is, banking hours. Now, I mean, we're still looking into it because there's a whole lot of administration hurdles to deal with.
yes.
If somebody accrues that hour in January and then tries to use it in November, well, now we've maybe given them a raise in that time, so now we're having to pay out at a higher rate. I mean, with our current cap on how much you can carry over in terms of vacation, we have a lot of employees who take most of December off already. If you add comp time on top of that, now they're taking off most of November and December. You potentially deal with the staffing. It was brought up, and we're still digging into this, that it's maybe possible that if you accrue comp time and somebody requests to take that comp time, it's not a yes or no situation. Since they've already accrued, they can just
You
take
have
it.
to.
And so, I mean, that creates a very sticky situation.
Yep.
In terms of, well, Matt might be trying to call someone in to plow, and they're like, no, I'm taking comp time. I don't have to come in. I'm not coming in. And so the comp time is one that has been pushed through the suggestion box a number of times, and it's one that we haven't nixed at this point, but there is a whole lot of stuff behind. It's not as easy. 99% of employees are never gonna abuse it, and I would bet we have no one on staff who would, but you get one employee who does, and they might ruin it for all. And so we are trying to make sure, if we bring forward a recommendation to allow that, that we have worked through all of the hurdles and we know what exactly we're bringing to you.
Yeah, that seemed like that was a tough thing to, because that's how we got away from it, right, Matt? And that was even before 2018. That was, oh, is it? Oh.
And I fully get it, cause you'll get a brand new employee who maybe has 0 vacation accrued, and they have something coming up, or they suddenly get sick or something, and they're like, well, it'd be nice if I even had like 10 hours of comp time. Well, again, where do you draw that line and that sort of thing? And
Yeah.
so the comp time I could see coming up as a sticky issue, as there are some employees who really want it, and we are trying to work through all the logistics before we truly make a decision on it.
Yeah, and I think we had
Really
situations,
frown on them.
where you could accrue so much too, we'd have to, all of a sudden, someone would retire and we'd have to write them a
Right,
$1,000 check that wasn't budgeted for
Yep.
because of all the comp time they had, so.
Yeah.
No, you're right, that's
Finding that it's
sticky.
hours over 40 or?
And yeah, that would be hours over 40. You can either choose to take it as comp time, which any hour over 40 becomes an hour and a half due to overtime law, or you could choose to pay out.
Well, would you do that like on a, if you're over 40 and you're paying time and a half after 40, do they bank it at the time and a half, or do they bank it as an hour?
Yep, so you'd bank at the time. So yeah, so if you worked a 50-hour week, that'd be 10 hours that you would then bank at 15 due to the overtime law.
I'd vote no to that.
And then ideally, they'd have to either use it or cash out that year,
They would
right?
have to
Because-
use it or cash out at the end of the year.
Cause we had people saving it for 10 years and then being paid out at a different rate than what it was earned at, I think.
Correct,
was
yeah.
what-
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
that's how it used
you'd
to
have to
be.
cash out it, even at the end of the year, though, you're still, under the step system, we may be paying a different rate at the end of the year than we were at the beginning of the year. And so, yeah, they're,
Oh, do the steps come on anniversary dates or do they come at the
for everyone
January
hired
1st?
after 2010, they come on your anniversary date. That was a change that was implemented back in 2010, I believe, because that's kind of when it changes over. So, there are still some employees, like Mr. Rinda here, that would get a step on January 1, whereas Robin and myself would get our step
On your anniversary.
on our anniversary.
Or promotion date. So my date did get moved.
Oh, that's
Oh,
true.
cause you,
Oh,
yeah,
cause you
true.
got the director.
That-
Okay.
I
that-
just
that-
clarified.
That's true.
Sorry,
That's
Josh.
true. No, you're right. Yeah, so promotion date would move that as well. So if you have an employee in the same position since 2010.
So, just, maybe I misunderstood that then, so the steps are on anniversary pretty much for almost everyone then?
Yep,
And then the 3%, is that anniversary?
January 1.
Oh, so we have two different income
We have,
salary changes throughout the year.
correct.
Interesting. I didn't
And that is
understand
something that our finance department has meticulously pieced apart so that our budget shows assumptions. And yeah, I'm impressed with what they've been able to do in terms of budgeting to track. Well, you're gonna get paid out at 967 hours at this rate, and whatever 2080 minus 967 is at a different rate.
I'm just curious why it was changed before to be anniversary date instead of annual.
I don't know.
So the tough thing that I've run into at my previous job had it on all January 1. We started trying to transition off of it because you'd get an employee who maybe started on October 31st. And does that mean they get a raise in 3 months? Or does that mean you have to wait a year and 3 months and force that employee to work a year and a half or a year and 3 months before getting their step? So to try to get away from that, it was to just put that on the anniversary date. Whereas the cost of living is one where you're adjusting the whole scale, not necessarily piecing out that individual employee, because there are many employees who are on the same job title scale, and so that would all adjust at one time as well then, which is why they're on different days.
Was there some legality behind that, or does the council have the ability to go back before 2010 and just cash whoever might still be sitting on those hours?
I don't know if there's any legality behind it or not. It's currently written into the handbook that way, I'm guessing as a way to appease people that are, hey, I've been working here at that time, maybe I've been working here for 20 years and I've gotten used to this January 1, and now you're gonna make me wait another 6 months, and so again, you can make me wait a year and 6 months or whatever that would turn out to be to get my raise. And so to try to appease that large group of people, you basically put that rider in there so that once we've cycled through all those, everybody will be on the same system. But
Okay.
That's kind of where we're at.
All right. Anything else? Otherwise, I'd take a motion to approve these changes, on the employee handbook.
With the idea that you'll get back to us on some of the issues
Yep.
that. we-
Correct, we've already made the notes and we'll be researching.
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Motion made by Bruce, seconded by Maggie. Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carries. All right, Civic Plus.
So Civic Plus, not to be confused with Civic Systems, similar name, but different concepts. Civic Plus is the system we are looking at for meeting management software or the electronic or online council packets. So in spring and summer of 2022, Barb Alschmid really kind of led the way, talking with peer cities about what options they use and doing some research. So leading her way, she went through 3 software options and I would say did deep dives into all 3, Civic Plus, Granicus, and Diligent or iCompass. So numerous times Barb followed up with City Administrator Tetzloff and myself. And when I was able to, I would hop on different meetings with Barb as well to see the different platforms. So after consideration and review, we found that Civic Plus was a reasonable annual cost and had system updates that we were anticipating and looking for without additional costs. They have the most years in the business and the most local government clients compared to the other options as well. So this was something that you might recall too is on historic visioning documents and continues to be on a visioning plan. So it's something that we included in the 2023 budget. And anticipated costs per the included agreement is $9,200 for the first year. And they would expect that if we have approval to move forward, they would start the process of getting the setup going and getting a project manager assigned in the next 2 to 3 weeks. So definitely something.
So what is it, this is, then our meeting format's gonna change?
So this would be, instead of receiving your packet as a PDF, it would be a way to access the packet online via the website in a very convenient manner. That would be open to anybody in the public to access in the same way. Where basically you click on the agenda item and the things attached to that agenda item pop up, and so you can say, I wanna look at the resolution, or I wanna look at the memo. I wanna look at the additional handouts, and it's just a click there instead of having to scroll down through the entire packet.
And internally, more electronic communication instead of us emailing Barb like a PDF or giving her a printout like we would have in the past. We would be able to upload things that would go for approval, like to Josh or to Barb, and then just upload it like Josh was explaining, so.
Are we able to make notes within the document, you know?
Yes, I believe that users are able to make your own notes.
Yeah, because to you, the stuff would come out like a PDF, and so if you wanted to make a note on it through Adobe Reader, as I kind of explained how apparently you can now do that on Adobe Reader, be able to do so.
Then we can save it.
I wasn't
Yeah.
aware that,
Computer?
Yep, yeah, and so you'd be able to download it and save it if you want to for that reason.
So we can't
Does
go
it-
back and look at this like in a month
Look,
from
give
now?
me a frickin' break.
Yeah,
What's that?
Nothing.
It
I'm
would be
trying
like
to
an
say
electronic
something.
Oh, I'm
library.
sorry.
Yeah,
it basically is an yeah, that's a good way to put it. Like an electronic library that allows you access to all the documents. Instead of it coming as one giant PDF, you're able to access specifically which PDFs you would want to access.
And searchability, if you were looking for like a keyword,
Or,
you could search the library.
yeah, or say after the fact, let's say, 4 years from now, you wanted to come back and see what we were talking about with the last item. If you had this, you could go back in there and you'd see on there, okay, there was item 11B, click on 11B, and it'll pull up all the documents and it'll take you to that exact place in the video where we talked about it, so you wouldn't have to search your way through the video.
oh, really?
Yeah, so it flags it both the video timestamp as well.
Oh, cool.
So I was trying to ask a question, again, getting back to the note-taking. It's not my understanding that Adobe Reader allows interaction with the document. that it strictly is just for reading. So if that can be tested and verified,
Yes, so I can show you after this meeting if you'd like how you can do that, if you've got your.
But I think she's getting at with this new system, right?
right, so does it, when you go into the supposed new system and open that document, is it being converted then to a PDF?
Correct, I believe you were
So
opening it as a PDF.
Okay, okay.
So as far as what we see and do, it won't change at all for us.
It'll change in the fact that your packet isn't one giant packet. It is in a packet you can click on, okay, now we're talking 11B, I'll click on 11B and pull up a link for the resolution, a link for the memo, and a link for the attachment.
It's a linked agenda.
Yeah,
Right, so what my practice is, I open the document and I write notes on it and then save it on my computer. So would I have to save each individual document on the cloud
No, you'd be able to download,
The
like
whole
download
thing.
the packet, download the entire,
and then save the packet?
right.
Okay.
But if you were just like, oh, I just want that one attachment, then you could download said agenda attachment and save it that way.
I guess I'm not seeing what difference it would
Yep.
be for us then.
Yep, so I apologize, I'm trying to think, do you remember one of the cities around us that used it, if they wanted to go check it out?
Is it Faribault?
Is it Faribault that uses it?
I don't want to get confused between the different.
It seems like the only difference is we, instead of getting an email, we would just have to pull it down from the cloud.
Well, Barb would still email you and say, you know, the packet has been released, because it's gonna go through, like I said, these approval processes, to be like, Barb's prepared it, and Josh will review it and like, say it's approved, ready to go, and then Barb would email you and say, the link is available for your viewing, here's the link, and then it would take you to
Right.
the page that you can either download or look at it like agenda view.
Okay. Go
The
ahead.
biggest benefit is really in the back door kind of part of it where we would
more
save
for
it in
them,
the
more-
video. and
yep.
all.
So there will be convenience for us, and it'll also be easily accessible by any residents who wanna specifically look for anything as well. It'd be much more convenient. And, yeah, so I mean, if you're used to going through the whole packet page by page and taking notes, it would be a change, cause you'd have, I mean, there'd be some back and forth as to looking at stuff. If you will say, hey, I really wanna look at this item right now, and maybe I don't wanna have to worry about flipping through all the other stuff, I can see a convenience. I mean, it really comes down to how you'd use the system. As stated, there's a certain major time savings on our back end in terms of how we're saving files and whatnot. And I believe for someone in the public who's accessing it, it's much easier to navigate. And it's one of those things where, and again, I apologize, we had a whole.
Faribault to Owatonna,
Parbo and Owatonna.
comparable.
I will send you guys, if you don't wanna pass it tonight, I can send you guys a link if you wanna go check out what these other city council, what it looks like to basically access the packet through the website. And kind of how that user experience is.
How about at our next council, if you do a demo for us?
Yeah, we could do that.
Good idea.
So in your mind, it's worth $9,200 a year?
In terms of the ease and kind of, I mean, it's the way that most cities are going, and maybe not exactly the software, but as she stated, there was 3 that kind of people are going with, just due to the user experience and the ability for people to access the information very easily.
Okay. And we have ARPA funds for this first year or next year?
It's just
Correct.
a one-time cost, right?
No, we pay annually.
Nope,
it's an annual?
this would be an
Okay.
annual cost.
All right.
I'm always leery of that because the prices tend to shoot up really quick after year 1 or 2.
But you're thinking there'd be some savings on your time?
I think there'd be significant savings on staff time, as we're saving various files, and we'll get like 12 different versions of a file before we get to the final end, and I do think there'd be quite a bit of savings on staff time.
Record retention as well.
So this would solve kind of the index question I had last time around where it would
Correct.
index it kind of for
Yep,
you.
so yeah, so every single thing would be indexed.
However, if we don't approve tonight, I do know that the vendor is at a point of increases for the next year, which are common year over year. So if we don't approve tonight, there's a chance that there would be an increase, I think.
Let me just see if I can find one real quick then.
So if we were to save it, approve it tonight or the next meeting, pay the 9,200, would we lose all that record retention if do we own that record retention if 3 years from now it all of a sudden doubles in price and we say we're not gonna do it anymore? That's always my fear, we get used
Yeah,
to doing something and then we get.
we'd have the ability to download everything off ourselves, and we'd have still all the materials on, I guess, the back end. You wanna grab me, Mitch? So I am at the city of Owatonna, who uses this. And apparently, how does that work? Oh. Okay, it's real confusing.
Oh,
So this is what they use it for quite a few different things over here, from the airport commission, charter commissions. But if you go to the last city council meeting they have up here, which is May, you can click on the city council meeting, and this would be a PDF of the entire document, should you want to do so. Or and they're only showing minutes. That's not helpful. Generally what would appear here is you'd get the agenda, the minutes, the packet. You click on the one you want to open. Did they say what the price was going up?
have a good night.
Let me see if I can grab a city that uses it a little more extensively.
I'd assume there'd be some storage costs if you're gonna store video, especially for a few years.
So that is built into that price. That was like any sort of costs, like was built into what we figured out.
Unlimited storage?
In terms of your meeting, so our cost would handle up to 5. I think their minimum is they'll handle like the video, like the up to 5 different boards. And so, yeah, if we met every week.
Wow, that's
video
a
would be
lot
up
of
there.
storage for video. Normally they have a maximum, but.
And it's an unlimited number of meetings, unlimited number of users as well.
In our situation, we just have
It
one.
probably doesn't store the video, it's gonna link to certain points of the YouTube, or something. I doubt they're storing the video.
Yeah.
And Faribault's page isn't loading, so.
So it's already not working?
So how long does YouTube save our videos?
Ever?
Yep.
Take them down.
I think.
Oh, we have to do that.
Do we have our own channel then?
Yeah.
So do we pay for storage after a certain limit? Not yet?
YouTube does not charge.
As of yet.
YouTube makes more money than anything else at Google right now, so, no. They're more than happy to have you go on there and load all your content. There's more content created every minute than there was in
Airport Commission.
So what do you wanna do? Do you wanna table it or purchase it?
This is 10%.
So the increase would, I guess, be 10%.
Okay,
And so, I mean, that was part of what brought us here tonight, is when they told us, well, either you make a move or we're looking at going up 10%. At this point, if you guys are unsure, it might be something that we do hold off even at a 10% increase. Because I'd rather you guys not do something that you absolutely are unsure of.
I think the view we're seeing is obviously just public view and not like council view being able to click on the agenda.
Yeah.
Well, I for one would like a demo just to see it in use.
okay.
But if it's possible to go back to Civic Plus and say that, you know, the council is 99.9% there, but unfortunately, we're not able to have a demo at our council meeting, we would appreciate holding the price for 2 weeks.
If you
It's
can
worth a
get-
try.
Yeah, if you can get some history on what that goes up, if it's a 10% increase every year, that's a little concerning.
Yeah, we can do some research on that.
So we're gonna have a demo on this at the next council meeting, so we'll table it.
So this would be just used for city council then?
At this point, like I
But it
said,
could-
we'd have licenses for up to 5, and so we could have other department boards start to move into the paperless software as well.
Yeah, I
Is
saw
this
that.
something,
Okay,
we're more capacity than we need, and we're jumping into a little too early, or?
so if,
I guess the savings on the administrative side is really,
Yeah,
motivates me, I guess.
yep, could you grab me again? I went back 2 jobs because they use the system as well.
I see you had TigerNet on your browser, though. That wouldn't be Clemson Tigers, would it?
Yep.
yeah, he's,
Our
I went to grad school at Clemson, so.
No, I know. I
avid
knew that.
fan.
That's why I said it.
Avid fan. So, City of Brighton, Colorado, who I worked at prior to coming to Minnesota, uses the system. And this is generally how it looks. So I went back to 2002 so I could grab their most recent stuff here. And if you, let's say, we'll grab their December 20th packet from 2002. Now, they've used it a little more extensively than Owatonna has. So all that will appear from their 2022 packet is their agenda when you click on it. But within the agenda, they've linked all of this stuff. And so if you want to look at consent stuff, you can click on the various items and get just the information for that. And they actually break down into a system where you can see the various minutes or reports for this specific item right here, dealing with legislation. If you get down into their resolutions, they've got the various attachments through here. And so really it's a method of providing this information to you in basically a more of a hot link system instead of sending you all the documents in just one bulk item, if that makes sense.
So then for us to annotate or write notes and save it, do we get this whole tab configuration then, or just the document?
Well, so,
Public view.
yeah, and this is the public view. I would want to see what the behind the view is, but if you are opening up, where'd that download to? Why isn't it popping up?
Okay, so far I'm not impressed.
I think Jordan and Shakopee uses this too.
Have to see where that popped up. My computer's created 2 screens here, so I'm trying to see way over there.
It's a Clemson thing.
It
Yeah.
probably is. No, I can bring back a demo next week and make sure I can walk you guys through the full system as well.
I won't be here, but that's all right.
well, next week,
Or
The
2 weeks,
next meeting?
2 weeks. I mean, I can sit down with you as well if you'd like, Bruce.
you're gonna be gone that meeting,
Yeah, it's 3 weeks from now, isn't it?
February 6th.
I think so.
Okay, so we'll table that, and the next item that we have on the agenda is general business under 11C, which is the chamber liquor request, which everybody has in front of them.
Correct. The chamber made this request today for January 30th at the depot. All the application requirements, I guess, at this point have been met. So I would recommend approval of the temporary liquor license.
Does somebody want to make a motion?
So moved.
Rick made the motion, is there a second?
Second.
Sean made the second, any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. All right, next, we have miscellaneous, you got the park minutes. I'll go around the horn. Rick?
Nothing.
Bruce? Okay, I just have one thing, is the truck, we talked about a truck ordinance, revamping that. And I was hoping Tim and Ken were gonna be here, so, to include box trucks and all that other stuff, so maybe if we can.
I will talk to them about that and
Yeah.
see where we're at.
Okay, that's all I had. Sean?
Mine was one directed, just a question to Ken. I can wait till the next council meeting, so it was the truck storage park over here and
Oh, yeah.
the screening. I just wanted to,
Oh, the one out on the highway?
out on 21, yeah.
Yep, Ken's never getting another day off, that's what I get for.
Maggie,
I don't have anything.
Josh?
Couple things, just to kind of report back. So I think it was at the last meeting, we talked about the $50,000 on evidence spending in the police department. So had Tim look into it. He said that, he talked to, Chief Vasapka and memory and then kind of looking back at various stuff, the construction project and the evidence lockers, that specific part of the project was between $2,000 and $3,000 to construct that little room with the evidence lockers. The bulk of that roughly $50,000 came to kind of reconstructing the garage area, because they had to basically put up a door. I think Matt said he was part of that whole project. To basically be able to cut that door in there because it wasn't designed to have a door in there. They had to
the
put support
stairs down.
beams and stairs and.
Oh, that's right.
There was a whole
That's what that
project to
was.
that.
Okay.
So that was that update. A few meetings ago, you had asked about, revenues from the baseball association that we are collecting. It, looks like we are completely squared up on the revenues that we get from them for baseball stadium improvements.
From the Orioles or the associations or?
Which one was that? Do you remember, Robin?
From the baseball.
Baseball
From the
association.
association. I think
Yeah.
the Orioles.
In their
still might-
pledges?
Yes.
It's the question I was the pledges, and you said
Okay.
they only owed 3,000 or something.
And we can check on the Orioles too to see if there's something going on there. The other one I had was we talked about the, Day on the Hill, go meet with your legislators, which I believe was on what, March
6th or something,
6th? That sounds right.
or 9th.
9th, I think.
March 9th, yeah.
March 9th. I was just wondering, who was interested in going, only in that when I had Kim look into it, they asked about, dietary restrictions. And so, I mean, I know Dwayne doesn't eat meat, but, that's a joke. I know you do eat meat. I didn't know if those people that were, if those people that were interested in going, if they had any dietary restrictions.
I'm interested in going, and no, I don't.
Okay.
No, if I go, I'd.
No, I don't either.
Okay, so I will say no dietary restrictions, and, Rick, I'll make sure we can get accommodations, for you to go as well. You shouldn't have to do that, since you're going on behalf of the city.
Yeah, but it's expensive. If you want me to take care of it, I will.
I realize that, but I mean, as a city council member, it feels like something the city, should take care of.
All right, if you do that, then I don't have to worry about the date.
Okay.
I do have one question I forgot.
Yep.
Can you
Yeah.
go back to me or?
Were you done?
Yes, I am done.
Okay, yeah, go back to you.
Okay.
Oh.
Matt, I was hoping the First Avenue snow plowing thing came up again, the sidewalks on both sides, and I heard there was letters that were sent out to people that hadn't plowed. And the sidewalk on the east side, that does get done by the city, is that correct? That's correct, yep. Okay, and I know we talked about before, maybe we switch it every other winter, or why, maybe there was a good reason why that side was done and the other side wasn't. Because apparently from some of the residents, it seems like the west side takes the brunt of the snow. I don't know if that's correct or not, or if it just seems that way from when that street gets plowed, but, or maybe when they're coming off one of the side streets and they make that turn, on some of, some of the other streets, whether it's Third, Fourth, or Fifth, but, and then what would how much time would be consumed if we did both sides of that, since it's such a main thoroughfare?
So I guess, just jumping in here real quick, I know last year where we landed on it was, yeah, I mean, there could be some solutions. We definitely look into it. I know that's kind of where we also lumped in the grass cutting thing, and the fact that we had a long conversation and ended up staying with the grass. I didn't know if that just kind of meant that maybe we're just gonna leave everything where it's at for right now, which is why we haven't dug too deep, I guess, into the sidewalk shoveling. I also know that some of the difficulty on the west side that people have talked to us is because there's quite a large retaining wall there for a block or two. And our solution
Oh,
with
yeah.
them and some of those residents seemed okay with this solution was to basically, instead of trying to heave your snow up over the retaining wall into your yard, we'll make an exception and allow you to push that snow out into the street, and we'll come by every once in a while and clean that up a little bit.
Could that be affecting some of the other neighbors then, probably, if that snow gets pushed back on the street and then it's moved down in front of there?
I mean, it's possible, but I think do we come out and blow that out then?
Yeah, so the plow drivers are instructed, it's in between Second and Third Street, that big retaining wall, so it's, 4 properties, and our plow driver is instructed not to push it back onto the sidewalk, that you just leave that little windrow of snow on, in the parking lane, and then we haul it away a couple times a year.
Oh, okay. It seems like I thought of course, the letter went out to people and then that's what got them fired up again about it. So, is there more of a green space on that east side that, where it doesn't, where all the snow doesn't go right on, back onto the sidewalk when plowing?
Yeah, so the west side, there is no grass boulevard, it goes directly onto the sidewalk.
Onto the sidewalk, so
the east
that's
side has a grass
now I
boulevard.
got it, now that's, now I understand.
Otherwise, that street is plowed right down the center line, everyone gets equal snow, but yes, you are correct, if someone comes off of Fourth Street to make the turn,
Yep.
that corner house might get a little bit of that snow that comes off the plow. Other than that, it is split 50-50.
But the real issue is probably that the other side has green space to where that snow can pile up and not impact the sidewalk as much as the
That
west
is
side.
correct. That is a perfect example of why we really push for that grass boulevard when we can.
And that makes sense too, but, so I don't know if it makes more sense, obviously I don't wanna hear from the people on the east side, next winter or whatever, when we do it. And that sidewalk does not go all the way down first, all the way out to 29, right?
It
I
does
mean,
not.
it
Nope.
goes halfway. So I don't know, I mean, can you get maybe a rough idea, would that take another hour or two of city staff time to do both sides of that street? Or
I
something
can
that
look
we could
into
at
it.
least look at and,
Yeah, I can get you, I mean, I'll tell you, if you get that 14-inch snowfall, it's gonna take you 3 times the amount of time. But I can get you an average, what it takes.
okay. I just wanna come up with a solution, cause obviously that letter sent a bunch of them off that, you know,
Yep.
that,
But it certainly opens a can of worms for everybody in the city then,
I
because that
know.
sidewalk, and I used to complain that the bank had to pay for it, and Hy-Vee and the thing, and the gas station didn't get free snow plowing.
right.
And so there's a lot of that in town.
No, I agree, Bruce.
Like, get their sidewalk plowed, it gets an advantage
Yeah,
all across the town.
right.
But the reason we do that is for safety issues, so we have one access.
So yeah, so
So is there a reason we
we're
need
attempting, we're
two?
attempting to create walkable routes. I know if you
Yeah.
look at the map, it kind of takes your main thoroughfares and attempts in the most economical way possible. If you, for some reason, had to walk from your house to downtown, you'd be able to do so without us having to clear every single street. It kind of in many ways, it follows the main roads, and then attempts to kind of make a loop and maybe a spoke with some loops is basically what we attempt to do. I would guess, without staring at the map, that we probably do one side of the street than the other because it keeps us from having to cross the street to keep somebody walking, if that makes sense. And so,
Right,
so you can
okay.
turn and head north without having to cross the street. And I would guess that's why it got basically put in there on the side it was, as an attempt to make it ease for the walkers, which is why we are plowing in the first place.
And that's a very valid point. I guess I'm just trying to see if there's a way that we can mitigate some of this. I mean, cause they do take the full brunt of the snow on that street. I mean, it goes right onto
Yeah, on their side.
on their sidewalk.
Yeah.
There is no green space to.
But you said it just plowed up to the side of the road.
In between the Second and Third Street it is. The rest of it's plowed curb to curb.
Oh, onto the sidewalk.
Yes,
Cause there's like an
yes.
8-foot side of 8-foot retaining wall on that one block where there's no way for them to even blow the snow up and over.
Okay.
And it's been like that from
They,
the
well,
time that
once-
street was done.
Right, right.
Okay, again, I don't know if there's a right or wrong solution yet. I brought it up for several residents and I'm just kinda curious if there's some way that we're never, not gonna make everybody happy, to Bruce's
Right,
point,
it
obviously.
certainly seems like that's an exceptional circumstance.
Yeah.
But it is a main thoroughfare too. I would guess that would, whether that means both sides should be, I mean, next to Main Street, that's probably or maybe, well, that and 37.
Yeah, I mean, we can look into it and see what we got
Okay.
and like what that additional cost would look like.
Okay. Robin,
Nothing.
Matt?
I got nothing.
Okay, I take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
Second?
Okay, motion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries.
Well, everybody good luck with the snow tomorrow.
Talking to Sean on the way up, I was surprised